Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and for my card today, of course, I had to use the new Honeybee Stamps Coffee Break stamp set, and I just really love this coffee cup stamp, you know, with the overhead view and little bubbles and the heart and the spoon. So what I decided to do was stamp this multiple times onto this is some Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor paper. And it's already cut down to 5 by 7 inches, and I am inking up this stamp with VersaMark ink and then pouring white embossing powder over it. Not heat setting it yet. I just pour the white embossing powder over it after I stamp it each time so I can see where I'm stamping, because it's white on white, so it's a little bit difficult to see. So once I've got these stamped kind of randomly across this background, I melt this with my heat tool. So get it good and hot, and then melt all this embossing powder. And then I decided to go along and use my anti-static powder tool a second time. And then there's little heart images and little coffee bean images in the set. And I decided to ink those up and kind of fill in some of the blank spaces between all these little cups and saucers. So just stamped those, coated them with the embossing powder, and then once I was kind of happy with all that, melted that again with my heat tool. So once everything's melted and it's cooled off, I'm going to tape this to my cutting board. And this just is going to kind of help from keeping the paper, one, keeping it in place, and two, keep it from warping. And I've just got this little ceramic palette that I think I picked this up on Amazon or something. But I'm just using this to mix up a bunch of different colors from my Gansai Tambi watercolor set. I was thinking kind of jewel tones. I love this time of year. And jewel tones are just a love. So I've got several different colors kind of mixed up here, and I also mixed black and the kind of shimmery white color together to create a silver. And that's what I used to fill in all the little spoons. And then, of course, I go and start filling in my coffee. And what I love about doing the heat embossing with images like this is I can just go along. I don't have to worry about anything running into each other, because all that heat embossing kind of creates that raised edge, so everything has its own little section, so I can just go along and do my thing and not have to worry about, you know, going from one spot to another and letting everything dry so it doesn't run into each other. So I just sat and filled in everything. So I did just kind of jumping around from one thing to another because I was just having fun with it. And then those jewel tones that I had mixed up, that's what I did for all of the saucers and the cups. Again, just kind of went randomly with this, just letting the colors kind of do their thing. So just going along and picking up that color and painting it on. And then once I was done doing all of that, I can go and do my background. Now, more often than not, I'll do my background first because it takes usually the most amount of work and I don't want to mess it up. But again, because everything was heat embossed with this, it wasn't very difficult. It was just a matter of filling it in. Plus the fact I just kept the background really simple. I just kind of watered down the purple and added a little bit of blue. And then I'm just painting it on to basically just fill it in. I'm not worrying about, you know, creating shadows or anything like that. I just thought the color would be kind of pretty, just nice light purple to kind of make these cups and the little coffee beans and the hearts stand out. So once everything is fully painted, I let it dry. Didn't take too long. But once it's fully dry, I grab my Copic Opaque White. Got a little bit of that onto an acrylic block. Don't need very much of it. And then I'm going to water this down so that it is thinned out quite a bit. And then it's still very vibrant and white. And then I'm going to flick my paintbrush against the edge of this acrylic block and create a little bit of a splatter. And then same thing, let that completely dry before I remove the tape. And then I cut this down to just slightly smaller than an A2 size card front. It's about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, something like that. And then for my sentiment, I am using the Perfect Blend stamp set. And I used all the different little companion stamps, and they just butt up nicely against each other so that I can stamp the words "I love you more than." So I got those onto my acrylic block, and then I have a piece of vellum here. Same thing, use my anti-static powder tool, and then I'm holding that piece of the watercolor paper just above it, just to kind of give me a visual, because I wasn't sure if I was going to stamp this more in the center or off to the side. So just use that as my little visual guide, and then I'm going to stamp that with the VersaMark ink, and then coat that again with the white embossing powder. and then melt this with my heat tool. And with vellum, it does not take very long at all, especially when you're working on like a creation like this where you melt heat emboss onto watercolor paper. That takes the longest because the watercolor paper is so much thicker, and then vellum literally takes a few seconds. So you just have to pay attention because vellum can burn really easily. So I melted that with my heat tool, and then I'm going to trim that down with my paper trimmer. And then I use the coordinating perfect blend honey cuts, and I die cut the word coffee from a dark brown cardstock, and then I always call it the little bubble die, from a latte colored cardstock. So once those were die cut and I popped out the centers, I'm going to adhere those together with just little dabs of multi-medium matte adhesive. So little dabs in the thickest areas. You don't need very much of this at all, but with tiny little die cuts like this, I much prefer this adhesive because almost guaranteed it's going to ooze out a little bit off the edges and you're not going to see it when it dries. So I use my little reverse tweezers to hold this since they're such little tiny parts of a sentiment. Added my little bit of adhesive and then press that into place. And then once I got that done, I'm going to adhere my vellum sentiment to this watercolor piece. So figured out where I wanted it, used my grid line mat to make sure it was straight. And once I was happy with where I was going to place that on my card front, I can just fold over the edges onto the back, and then I just use tape to tape that down. So once I've got that taped down, I can adhere that die cut coffee word to finish off this sentiment. So it says, I love you more than coffee. So again, adhere that with the multimedia matte. And then I'm just going to put an acrylic block on top of that just to hold it in place so it adheres really well to the watercolor paper. So while that's drying, I'm going to make my card base here, which is the same kind of latte colored cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and then scored at 5 1/2. So it's a top folding A2 sized card. And I'm going to heat emboss another sentiment from the Perfect Blend set, and that's the one that says, please don't make me prove it. Or like some of their more like tongue-in-cheek little sentiments. So same thing, anti-static powder tool, stamp the sentiment with VersaMark ink, coated it with that white embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. Once that's melted and had a few seconds to cool off, I'm just going to rub off that anti-static powder with my hands. And then I decided to stamp that coffee cup and saucer image again, just with VersaMark ink and to kind of mimic the front. So stamp it a little bit randomly on the inside of the card. And then there's little solid coffee bean stamps in the Perfect Blend set. So I grabbed 2 of them and I'm just inking them up with a dark brown ink and kind of stamping those on the inside of the card as well. And then the little outline heart from the coffee break stamp set, I decided to stamp that next to the sentiment with just some pink ink. I just thought it was a cute little touch. So I stamped that, and then I adhered my card front with some foam tape. And then I discovered I don't have any brown Nouveau drops. How this is possible, I don't even know. So since I didn't have that, I just grabbed some brown enamel dots from my stash just to kind of give that last little bit of embellishment to this card. And that finished it off. So there will be a link below the video to the blog post with links to all the supplies used. If you guys are interested in any of that, check it out below, as well as, the pictures to the card, all that stuff. All that info will be in the description box below the video. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.